Okay, I'm going to show you how to run a linear regression on the TI84CE, and we're also going to learn how to create our residuals inside of the calculator, as well as look at the histogram of the residuals. So we're going to turn our calculator on, and we're going to look at hours studied versus exam score. So we've got our data right here. To input our data, we're going to go Stats, Edit, Enter. And you can see I've already put my data in, so I'm going to give you a second to pause the video and go ahead and input this data for yourself so that you can run along with me and make sure that you're getting back the same numbers that I am. Let's go ahead and pause it now. Okay, welcome back to my video. So here we are. We're going to learn how to create residuals and run our linear regression and look at our data and everything. So we want to know, first off, does the data even look linear? So should I be running a linear regression? So we've put it in, and we want to go ahead and look at the graph of the data. So we're going to go second stat plot, and if the kind of the best thing to do is turn all your stat plots off. That way you can come back, and if more than one of them is on, you don't have to deal with it. So let's turn them all off. So we're going to hit 4 and enter. We're also going to go under our y equals, and we're going to clear anything out that we have in there so that it doesn't mess with our graph right away. So we're going to go in here, and I have something here, so I'm going to clear it out and hit enter, and I'm just going to quit out and second quit clear. And now I'm going to go back to my stats plot, and I just want the first one on, so I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to turn it on, and I'd like it to be a scatter plot, which is the first one. Great. I do want my x's to be L1, and I do want my y's to be L2. Remember, your x is your explanatory variable, and your y is your response variable. Mark is just what little sign would you like to see when you see the scatter, and then color if you want it to look fancy. Now, you could build a window for it if you're good at building windows, but this is one of the few things in Zoom that Zoom does really well on our TI. So we're going to hit Zoom, and we want to go Zoom Stats. So if your menu is looking small, you can just hit 9 right away. You can either toggle down to it, or if you don't want to, if your finger is injured like mine and you don't want to toggle all the way down, you can hit 9, and it takes us right there. So there's all of our data, and that looks like a nice line, and there's no curve, and I don't see anything that's too clustered or any too big of a gap. So it seems like we could run, it's reasonable to run a linear regression on it. So let's run our regression. So we're going to go back to stats, and we're going to go over to calculate, and we want to calculate the regression. We'd like to calculate the first one, which is the linear regression. We'll hit enter. And now I'd like to store this regression equation, because if I do that, then I can see what the equation looks like against our scatter plot. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to store it. So the way to store it is to highlight this, and we're going to hit variable, toggle over to y variable. We want to be on function. We're going to hit enter, and this is which of the y's. So this is going to store it here in y equals. Which function would you like to store it under? As long as you cleared it out, it doesn't matter which one you store it under. Make sure that you store it under one that doesn't have something already in it. Again, why we want to go check this before we go do this. So we're going to hit enter, and now I just want to toggle down to calculate, and it's given me my regression equation. So let's write our regression equation down. So it is y hat is equal to, our slope is about 3.62x plus our y-intercept is about 60.16. So I'm rounding, but that's pretty good. To get the r and the r squared, if you're looking for that, you can go, and you don't have it, you can go to, before you do this, you can go to mode, and you're going to see right down here under stats diagnostic. So I'll bring this up so that you can see it. You can see stats diagnostic down here at the bottom. You want to scroll all the way down and turn that off onto on. You can also do this by going second catalog and scrolling down to where it says diagnostic on and hitting enter twice. So let's quit out of this. Now, I said before, as long as I store it, I can actually graph it. So let's look. So I could also enter this manually, but this is an approximated version. It's nice to have the whole one. If we go back to y equals, there it is. There's our regression equation stored nicely for us, exactly where we told it to, which was under y1. If we go to graph, it's already in Zoom Stats, so that's nice. So we'll hit this, and there it is. There's our lovely regression equation shooting right across for us. Now, one of the things that you need to do is you need to calculate your own residuals. So remember that the residual, where do we have it? Our residual is equal to the observed y minus the predicted y. Ooh, and I went right into my data. So I want to look for the observed minus the predicted. We're looking at the y's. It'd be weird if we were looking at the x's, right? So the observed minus the predicted. So we're going to go back into stats, and we're going to make our lists do some math for us. So we'll go back into stats. We're going to go back into edit our tables. And I would like to have the predicted y values. So I have my observed y values here in L3 in L2, and I'd like to have my predicted y values here in L3. If you toggle up to the top, it turns out that you can do that, and what you're going to do, so if there's anything here, you're going to toggle up to the top, hit clear and enter, and that'll clear out whatever you have in there. If not, just go up to the top, and notice that it says L3 equals. What I would like it to be equal to is this equation with all of these x's plugged in already. And so we're going to do something tricky. Go back to variable. We're going to be highlighted up here, hit variables, toggle over to y variable, hit function, and now pick where you stored your equation. So I stored mine in y1. We're going to hit enter. And so now it says, hey, y1, that's the function we're looking at. We're going to use function notation. This is the name of our function right now, y1. We're going to use parenthesis. What would I like to be my input? Well, I'd like my x's, my observed x's, to be my input. And that's here at L1. So I'm going to say second L1, there's my input, and close my parentheses. So we're using function notation. We're telling L3 we want you to use the function y1, and we want you to input L1. And we're going to hit enter. And there are all the predicted y values for those specific x values. Notice my first two, my x value is the same, it's 0, and my predicted value is 60.16 for both of them. So now L3 has become my predicted y values. Okay, to get the residuals, I need the observed minus the y, so we're going to go over to L4. We're going to toggle up, and if there was anything in here, I'd clear it out, but there's not. And what I want to do is I want to tell it, hey, I want my observed minus my predicted. Well, my observed are in, go back. My observed are in L2, so I'm going to hit second L2 minus my predicted are in L3. I'm going to hit enter, and there is my list of residuals. Okay, now I want to look at the histogram of it, right? So we're going to go back up, and we're going to go into y equals, and we're going to turn off our regression equation. So I don't want to get rid of it, I just want to turn it off. And to turn it off, I'm going to go to the equal sign, and I'm going to hit enter. And notice that when I toggle away, the equal sign is no longer highlighted. That means it's turned it off graphically. When I go to graph, it's not there anymore. So we're going to go back up to stat plot. I don't want to get rid of this, so I'm just going to go 4, turn all the plots off. That way I don't have to go into it. I'm going to go back to stat plot. I'm going to go to plot 2. And I want to turn this one on. And now what type I'd like? Well, scatter plot. What I'd really like here is I'd like the histogram. Oh, you can see I've already done this recently. What would I like the histogram of? I'd like the histogram of, let's pretend it had L1 in it. I'd like the histogram of my residuals. Where did I put my residuals? I put my residuals here in L4. So I'm going to go second L4. There are my residuals. Don't worry so much about our frequency. Okay, and we're good. But now I have a different stats that's going on, so don't just go straight to graph or it'll look funny. You're going to go back to zoom and zoom stats again, so we're going to hit 9 again. And there are my residuals, but notice that I'm kind of wonky around my y-axis, so it's useful if we go back into window at this point, and we're going to make our x-min and x-max the same so that it makes our bins nice, so that we can see whether or not it actually is behaving in a nice manner. So it looks like it's going all the way up to 19, so let's just make it -20 to +20, and now we're going to go back to graph. And now that looks like it's behaving in a fairly nice normal pattern. Now I know it's not the best normal, but for the amount of data that we have, this is roughly normally shaped. And so yes, our data is behaving our residuals are behaving in a roughly normal pattern. And that is what we were looking for. Tune in next time for our next video where we run our actual hypothesis test.